Google is using some sort of a topical graph to understand the redundancy of answers for specific query types. And essentially, we see, I think Mike King from iPullRank talks about is threat levels, right? Where different query types are going to experience different threat levels of AI, like based off of redundancy of answers within the topical knowledge graph that Google understands.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Bernard Huang with us. Bernard is the founder of Clearscope, the leading SEO optimization software for high-quality content teams. Before Clearscope, Bernard started an SEO consulting agency, was a growth advisor in residence at 500 startups, and led growth at a YC Combinator startup called 42 Floors. Bernard, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Stephan. I just learned that you were the author or are the author of Art of SEO. And
well, co-author. It wasn't just yeah, it wasn't just me.
That was one of my main reads back in 2013, 14, when I first got my feet, toes, hands wet with SEO, however you want to call it. And by jolly, things have changed quite a bit.
Yeah. Yes, they have. Which edition were you learning off of? Was it the first
I
or the
feel
second
like it
edition?
was the first edition of Art of SEO.
Yeah, because the second one came out, I think, around 2012. Yeah. Cool. Well, I know it's made a difference for a lot of people, and I'm happy to have participated in various awesome people's careers and trajectories in the SEO world. So yeah, glad you got some value out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's going on in this crazy SEO world these days, because there's a lot of turbulence and turmoil and uncertainty and fear with AI, with all these updates, and with the positioning that Google has about content that is AI generated or utilizing AI to assist. What are your thoughts about all this?
Oh man, there's so many different directions that I feel like I can go. I'll just start with the idea that I think Google search is experiencing its biggest existential threat with generative AI that it's ever seen. I think with the advent of generative AI, you have two really big problems that search engines like Google have to solve. Number one is the fact that anybody can spit out infinite content at fractions of pennies on the dollar. And so search engines now, instead of crawling these billions of web pages that they have to do, now it's entering this era of infinity, where people can spin up content farms, spit out bajillions of articles, content pieces, and it's a very complex problem that search engines have to deal with. So one big threat on the infinite content side. And then I think on the other side, you have large language models or chat bots, chat experiences that are cannibalizing searches at a bigger clip of cannibalization than we've ever seen, right? I do think that chatbots are really good at first drafts, at very, contextual based queries that you can feed it, something like, give me a 3-day itinerary for Denver that's family friendly and indoors, right? It's going to do better than what information retrieval system like a search index would do. And so I think you have these two forces at play, and you have Google looking at these two problems, and they're saying, "Wow, what do we do?" So that's kind of at least my big observations about the problems that the space is facing.
Yeah. So what are the solutions here? I mean, where do you see this going? How do you see the SEO community adapting, and Google?
That's the question, right? So I think Google, what I've been building theory around and what has been popular in the SEO community as of late are a couple of concepts. Number one, topical authority. Number two, information gain. And I think that those are designed to really try to circumvent this problem of like infinity content that we are dealing with.
Yeah.
Topical authority, at least in my definition or book, is really just how a website performs for related topics that it's published content on. And it's Google's way of saying that should you do comment spam or parasite SEO, or, buy links, sponsored links from a publisher, that publisher needs to perform well for the given subtopics, or else the link equity that it passes, or the overall like authority that it has within the topics that it's written about, is going to be, well, worth a lot less. So that kind of counterbalances a website who generates, millions of pieces of content, none of it being original or interesting, and none of it performing well, and people buying or pointing links to it to juice it in the search results. It's one way that I think Google's model is adapting to the new paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the other dimension that I see playing out is this idea of information gain. And information gain, I think, looking at the patent, it's really just saying, does, this set of documents provide additional information to the given topic? And, Google looks at all kinds of different documents that could, and then selects what it believes to be the ones that have enough information gain or addition to the topic, and then puts it into the index. I think on a more concrete level, what that boils down to is Google's knowledge graph of the topic. Like, let's say, for this example, we'll just use search engine optimization. I think search engine optimization is seeing a lot of information gain related to artificial intelligence, large language models, ChatGPT, Gemini, so on and so forth. So Google would understand that SEO as a concept is becoming more related to AI, LLMs, and it's going to then surface up those documents in relation to somebody's search on how to do SEO, or where SEO is going. So I think that component of the Google algorithm is very important, because large language models are primarily consensus models, where they are looking at ideas and concepts that we all generally agree upon. So it's more of this like reductionary, like this is what has worked type model. And I think that LLMs struggle with forecasting future paths of where a topic is likely to evolve, because, well, there's just not as much training data. that a large language model has about where, something could go. So I think it's those two components that I see Google leveraging to offset, counterbalance this, like, AI infinite content generation mechanism that we see ourselves going into.
So, what's a practical application for our listener of this concept of information gain as Google evolves its algorithms?
That's the question that I'm actually doing extensive research on. I think on one side, you have Cyrus Shepard from Zippy, who published the study recently. And, his findings were more or less alluding to the idea that firsthand experience type stuff, using the words I or me or you, had a strong correlation with better rankings and better performance. And I think, from a qualitative measure, that makes a lot of sense. Also, given that we've seen the extreme rise of user-generated content from sites like Reddit and Quora, we could surmise that Google's algorithm is really trying to look for or understand first-hand experience, personal perspectives, and do a better job serving that. And I think that, as a overarching definition of information gain from a subjective and qualitative sense, makes a good amount of sense to me. But from a quantitative sense, I'm still puzzled. And I say puzzled in the sense that, strictly talking about firsthand experience itself isn't necessarily going to just allow you to perform well in SERPs, right? Google isn't foolish. It's advanced machine learning technology, and it wants to know, whether or not your content is actually doing a good job covering the topic. You can't just say, I, me, you, here's what I think, and then, have that magically rank. So there's got to be, other quantitative factors at play. My best hypothesis that I've been testing has been really taking a look at the winners and losers of the recent March Core helpful content updates. And what I'm finding is that there is a strong correlation with this idea of entity coverage and entity redundancy for a given topic. Put more concretely, grammar websites, lyric websites have been demolished, for the most part, by recent updates, helpful content, March Core. And the initial hypothesis that the SEO community came up with is that, those sites oftentimes have, more affiliate links, more ads, all of, poorer user experience. But I think that the subtle nuance to everything isn't necessarily the UX or the ads, but the fact that the overall answer is redundant from an entity perspective. I think lyric websites are perhaps the best example where, if we're looking at Taylor Swift lyrics for one of her newer songs, well, lyric website A, B, and C are all literally going to say the same thing because lyrics are simply lyrics. I think you see that with celebrity net worth. You see that with a lot of history, facts, what is definition, right? Where all of us generally agree that X is X, or, the answer to this fact is Y. And I think that Google is looking at basically SERPs from a topical entity redundancy perspective. And they're basically drawing correlations to say that, okay, if I'm serving, results A, B, C, D, all through 10. And pretty much the topical like entity coverage of all of these websites overlaid on top of one another are more or less identical, then why does this as a search engine results page need to exist? Why wouldn't we just put our search generative experience or whatever they just renamed it to on top of the SERP and have that SGE or that AI component answer the question for the searcher? So I'm guessing that Google is using some sort of a topical graph to understand the redundancy of answers for specific query types. And essentially we see, what I think Mike King from iPullRank talks about is threat levels, right? Where different query types are going to experience different threat levels of AI, like based off of redundancy of answers within the topical, like knowledge graph that Google understands. So all of that said, I think the more practical example that, or like, the more like, okay, what should you do about it? I think that, you should recognize that search is going to change. We're going to see a massive cannibalization of many types of query classes, predominantly the more informational ones, like the what is, definition, how-tos, that more or less everybody agrees upon. And, that's because Google wants to put its own AI or SGE on top of the SERPs to answer highly redundant topics that it understands that we've all agreed upon. And Google then wants to introduce original and engaging content below that artificial intelligence that it's going to tack onto the LLM that it's putting on top of SERPs. And in those content results, it wants to surface, unique and interesting content. So a couple of then, other notes about this, right? Google strikes a partnership with Reddit for $60 million to ingest community data. I think that that's an advanced way of learning that Google can say, okay, topics change and evolve very quickly. And oftentimes the first place to look at how the topic could evolve is by looking at, community discussions. And so Google reading, Reddit data from the source can then build topical knowledge graphs of like evolution for any topic that's being discussed on Reddit, and then use those blueprints, right, of how community discussions are informing how a topic could evolve to then blueprint, like different matches of search results that mirror what, firsthand experience could look like. All that said is that I think SEO is suffering from SEO content is suffering from a packaging problem. And so instead of how to, train for a marathon, do email marketing, we assume that, box is moderate in terms of AI threat, in that, AI is just going to say, okay, sign up for an email marketing provider, do this, do that. And so instead of how to X, it's maybe how I X'd and here's what happened, right? And it could literally almost go through the same thing, right? Where you're like, oh, I use MailChimp and, I sent through this. But, then it's all of this like, I did this and here's what I thought and whatever, rather than a sign up for an email provider, do this, do that. It's like how I did this and how I did that. And so I think that's my best rendition on what we see happening.
I've noticed, and I know other SEOs have noticed, is a lot more searches are happening where the word Reddit is appended to the search query to improve the search results, and to surface up Reddit queries or Reddit content, because oftentimes it's better answering the question than just letting Google put whatever um, surface whatever results it wants. Reddit tends to provide a better answer. I think the quality of Google's search results are really coming into question, even with SGE. And yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that, well, there is that very speculative piece that Ed wrote about how, the head of Google Ads became the head of Google Search, and how that has contributed to, a de-emphasis on, search quality, and a, rapid monetization of Google Ads. And, that is one possible explanation of at least, this bad search like experience that we've found ourselves in. I think that there is a craving, right, for people who do want content that's not SEO'd, right? That's like not just like, oh, top vacuum cleaners, printers was like The Verge, but yeah, like best printers of 2024, and then having that start with like, what is a printer? It's just like, I think there's a lot of fatigue that people are feeling and seeing with the content results. And therefore there is a lot of people who turn to communities, whether they're doing searches for those products or services within communities, or because Reddit's search is so bad, they just use Google's indexation and append Reddit to the search. So overall, it demonstrates, I think, a pretty big lack of trust that searchers currently have with how Google search results are. And I think Google is, well, scrambling to kind of put together a plan to deal with, this attrition that they're seeing from search, whether that's people, just searching on TikTok, or people, just searching on, different ecosystems, or, not searching at all. But, Google is still Google. And I think that based off of what we're seeing with the presence of Reddit and Quora really entering the market, like in terms of search real estate, I think that Google's trying to say to us as SEO content creators that we do care about firsthand experience and different perspectives that people have. So make your content feel and look and read more like what's happening here, and we will reward it. And I think that that's also what Google propaganda is saying. That's what they're trying to say on X. That's what they're trying to say when they write their press releases. And I think that what I go back to is that, okay, obviously all this propaganda is here, but in execution and in implementation, what is this supposed to look like for the ecosystem, right? Like, how we can't just say I did this and I did that and expect to rank. So from a more concrete evidence execution based like standpoint, how can we then understand what Google actually is looking at? And I think that's the big question that a lot of people are thinking about these days.
Yeah. And do you think that link building is dead, or you think it's as important as it used to be? And perhaps some of the tools out there that assist you with link building, like, where do you see that going, and how does that tie into what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think I've developed a mental model of how I think Google search works, and it's really this like three-part like algorithm where technical SEO is step zero, right? It's like I think a lot of people confuse technical SEO with like ranking better and all of this stuff, but I think the goal of most technical SEO is really to just help Google access, understand, serve, and index your content, right? Like when we do heading tags or all image tags, it's really to give Google more context about our content and all of those things. And so if technical SEO is the found like not the foundation but like the way that Google comes to know your content, want to crawl it, and want to serve it, then the next step in the ranking process, I think, is authority. And I think authority is based off of links. I think it's based off of existing content performance. I think it's based off of, brand, all these things that, we all talk about in SEO. And the next part being authority is, I think, how you initially rank in the Google SERPs for the queries that your content body can rank for. And so, a good example would be NerdWallet. Obviously, they're a strong authority in credit cards, personal finance, and we can say that if NerdWallet published a piece of content around, which credit card is best for travel, you can imagine that Google is going to say, okay, it's NerdWallet. Their existing content for credit cards is strong. They have a healthy link profile from relevant sources that kind of points to the site. We're going to initially rank this at position 1 or 2 for best credit cards for travel or whatever. And so I would say that that's like the next part of what I understand to be the Google game. The final part is what we saw with the antitrust case, but the fact that user interactions and user engagement is ultimately what then makes your content piece rank 1 versus rank 7. And that's that Google doing this infinite A/B test on its SERPs to say, okay, if this was position 1, is this better or worse than what I previously had in position 1? And I think they measure better or worse by, if I send a legitimate user there, do they come back to our search results? And do they perform an additional action? Right? If they do, whether that's an additional search or an additional, click onto another page, then that's basically kind of a ding on your piece of content being rank number 1. So back to then the question, right, of link building, I see that link building has been de-emphasized in how Google approaches rankings. It's not just how many links and how strong are the links that are pointing to your site. It's this multifaceted, but what about your existing content for that particular topic? What about the content, the origin source of the link and their performance for that topic, right? If the New York Times isn't great at, ranking for credit cards, then why should a link that says credit cards to NerdWallet be valued that high? And so I think it's kind of this like, okay, if user engagement and interactions inform what's actually good, right, that the user selects, then whatever that piece of content links to internally or externally must be good. And, that's then very difficult to game from just okay, I want to like build links. I think one link from a top performing site on a given topic that you want to rank for is worth infinite, right? That's like, okay, that's worth a ton. So that's kind of how I think about link building.
Yeah. Okay. And so are you advising folks to not work on link building anymore these days, or to still do it but not put as much emphasis, or what's your advice to folks on who are doing link building?
Yeah, I would say no, like which part of the Google game that you're playing. So what I mean by that is if technical SEO helps you get indexed, crawled, and served, then if you're not indexed, you probably, unless you've done something really bad and you've gotten a manual web spam or whatever, you probably have some kind of technical SEO issue. And so you should, really think about your site architecture, your page load speeds, your UX, that kind of stuff. But then you get indexed and ranked. And and then if your ranks give or take 20 or 30 to 100, then you're playing the authority game. And the authority game is building quality, relevant links. It's refreshing underperforming existing content. It's pruning to a degree. And, that's how you get from, rank 62 to 12, right? Is you got to build links. Once you build a link, Google will actually like try to check your piece of content, right? They might bump you up to rank 26 for a day, see what happens, when you're there, and then, bump you back down. And so each additional link and each, content piece you refresh, you're basically making Google want to take another shot at testing your content in the user engagement game. But, then if you're already on, front page, second page of Google, I think your game becomes not as much about link building, but more about your ability to serve the searcher intent and conclude the search journey as quickly as possible. That said, I do think that there are a variety of really money queries where, like you just need a very big brand to do well. And, those are going to be things like best credit cards or, mortgage. Like you're just not going to rank for those really big head topics without a ton of branding and brand awareness like behind you, which is why I think, Google kind of says like, okay, well, are you a brand, right? They like ask that because, for a lot of those really head topics like vacuum cleaners, mortgage, credit cards, you kind of have to be American Express or Home Depot or Dyson, or else, yeah, you're not really going to rank. Anyways, so I'll say that outside of being, a very brand heavy like topical search, then, if you are on the front page or second page of Google, in my opinion, it's not really about links, right? It's about more brand awareness, or it's about giving, the searcher what they needed or wanted when they landed on your page.
Yep, got it. Now, you've been pushing a concept that I think you call ranch style SEO as compared to a pretty popular approach for many years in the SEO community called skyscraper content and or skyscraper SEO. What is ranch style? What's your position about this?
Yeah. So I think ranch style is supposed to be a play on skyscraper, although I think it has been confusing. But if a skyscraper is the ultimate guide to vacuum cleaners, and it has, what is a vacuum cleaner, how to use a vacuum cleaner, how to choose a vacuum cleaner, what are the benefits of using a vacuum cleaner, what are the disadvantages of using a vacuum cleaner, right? Like this whole mega ultimate guide, 14,000 word long thing.
Yeah.
And then ranch style is calling for the disintermediation or disaggregation of all of those sections into standalone pieces of content that match all of the different subtopics that a user could care about. Now, some people might say, well, Bernard, isn't that just hub and spoke or topic cluster? And that's where, ranch style is supposed to be one level deeper to say that I think hub and spoke and topic cluster are still too keyword centric, right? It's still like how to use a vacuum cleaner, best vacuum cleaners, right? And it's like, of course, we're going to have a how to use a vacuum cleaner. Ranch style takes how to use a vacuum cleaner and it disintermediates that one step further, right? And it says, okay, well, and vacuum cleaner is like perhaps not a great example, but if we say, ultimate guide for training for a marathon, right? And then you have how to train for a marathon. Within how to train for a marathon, there are at least 5 different perspectives, right, that a user is going to care about within how to train for a marathon, right? You have things to consider before signing up for your first marathon, right? Something that you would want to do before you actually then understood how to do it. Then you would have, how I train for the marathon. And then you could have, something like, common mistakes while training for the marathon, which is again part of that like how to. And then you would have, reasons why you shouldn't, sign, or should you sign up for a marathon, right? Kind of like giving people a counter opinion as to, like as they're thinking about how to do it, should they do it? And then, there's like how to train for it, very quickly as a beginner, as somebody, with no running experience, with, there's all of these different perspectives that somebody is likely to care about, even within how to train for a marathon. And the idea of ranch style is to say that because we're seeing the shift in the algorithm and people, wanting to know more about specific perspectives, that you actually need to then take, your child page or your spoke page or, whatever you want to call it, and break that out into, 3 to 5 different perspectives that the user could care about. So that way, at any point of somebody's search journey, whether they're a beginner or an intermediate, whether they need to learn it quickly, whether they are just thinking about signing up for it, you are hitting every single one of the perspectives that somebody could have for the topic.
Right. As separate articles.
As separate standalone articles, because you only have one title tag and you only have one above the fold experience, although Google has been obviously testing, rewriting that and deep linking people into search results or content results. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, how does this help with kind of inoculating or future-proofing your site in terms of the helpful content updates and algorithm and what Google is wanting to see in terms of EEAT and so experience and all that. So what would be your future proofing strategy that would include ranch style, but probably some other aspects too?
Yeah. I would say that it's to take your topic clusters, your topics, and break them out into many short form. I don't think it has to be long, but many short form, articles that answer the range of what somebody is likely to care about for that given topic. And it's both that simple and that hard. Because how do you know what the range of what somebody cares about within a given topic is, right? I went through a marathon idea because I've been doing, a lot of research on that. But, that's how I know, somebody might have to cram for it in like, under a month, or somebody with no like experience. And so I think that, in doing that, Google is also kind of prescribing this idea that you do actually need to be at least somewhat cognizant or somewhat of a subject matter expert to know that people aren't going to like care about things to consider before buying a vacuum cleaner. Well, they might, right? If there's like, oh, you have pets, or you live in a moldy place, maybe you want a steam cleaner. I don't know. But right, it's to say that, you kind of have to develop a bit more of a perspective on the topic that you're writing about, and pretty much like get rid of the idea of target keyword, and monthly search volume from your vocabulary as it relates to SEO. I guess, that's a pretty drastic thing to say.
Yes, it
but,
is.
But, like really think about like, okay, if you're going for mortgage, like, well, what about a mortgage? It's like how to get a mortgage. Well, what about how to get a mortgage? It's like, okay, how to get a mortgage with low credit score or no credit score. And it's like, okay, that's a lot closer to, answering a specific part of somebody's like searcher journey. And I think, kind of think about it as, what is the research journey that any given user could care about, and design content that hits as many of those components of the search journey. And then I think you've set up your content to have all kinds of potential, right? Like in a personalized search world, which we kind of live in, yeah, Google knows stuff about, each one of us, and it's going to say, yeah, you seem like you're an intermediate in running. So here's like the intermediate plan. In a large language model world that we, hybrid world that we live in, I think that you're getting large language model optimization is actually happening through search, right? A lot of it is trained on search results, search data. And the more content that you can seed into the search results, the more of a vote that you get in helping the language model infer what is the best answer. And so I think it sets you up across the board to be in any sort of world that we end up landing with, all of the crazy changes that we see happening with search.
Mm-hmm. How are you evolving Clearscope based on what is happening and all the changes and uncertainty? Like, maybe first explain what Clearscope does, what the platform and technology does, and what need it fills, and then how are you evolving that system based on what you're seeing happening in the SEO world?
Yeah, so Clearscope started 7.5 years ago, helping SEO content creators with content optimization is what the industry ended up calling it. But, from a technical perspective, what we were doing is helping users create content that passed Google's knowledge graph check for the topic. So back to the example of, how to do SEO, right? What Google is doing is that it's crawling your content when you publish it on how to do SEO, and it's using natural language processing to understand that your content is talking about things like keyword research, backlinks, technical SEO, content quality, internal links, right? And it's saying, okay, I know this topic, how to do SEO, should talk about backlinks and internal links and technical SEO. And if your content does not, well, that is probably not a great piece of content. So we're going to, penalize it by seeding it in the rankings less, or, not show it at all. Because if you talk about how to do SEO and you didn't include backlinks, like, this piece of content is likely to be very garbage, something like that. And that's how that whole industry, got its claim to fame in content optimization. Fast forward to today, I think you might look at content optimization and say, well, aren't you just encouraging the sameness of content being produced? And I think that is a very blurry line, right? I think that when we look at what happened with helpful content update in relation to lyric websites, grammar websites, coding websites, celebrity net worth websites, right? Google essentially crushed all of the content because it was redundant or highly consensus, right? Everything more or less included the same entities, had the same, knowledge graph overlap. And then Google's like, okay, these are unoriginal, not necessary, and we will crush them all. And Google did. But that kind of brings up, a question of, okay, but you can't just add unique, interesting, relevant entities for the sake of information gain, right? If I'm talking about how to do SEO and I start talking about blockchain and crypto and, Lamborghinis and God knows what, that might be too far away from Google's like understanding of the topic. So that breeds the question, like, what does actually creating meaningful content that Google is going to rank you for include? And anyways, that's to say, at Clearscope, that's exactly kind of the question that we are asking. We're saying that, okay, obviously, creating content that is highly consensus is not great, but Google still wants to look for content that is adding to where the topic is likely to be evolving. So how can we get you visibility into where a topic is evolving so that when you produce content, you're producing content that matches the topical evolution of what Google is expecting? That's like the key part, is that it's not about, I could surmise that SEO and blockchain eventually connect in some very weird world where, blockchains verify the authenticity or legitimacy of, what was published, and, SEO checks that. But, that's too far away from Google's understanding of where SEO is at. So it's really then about identifying, where Google is at in its understanding of the topic, and then giving you insights into, how to create, produce, refresh your content so that it's always feeding Google's understanding of where the topic can go.
Gotcha. And so this platform is something that works with whatever content management system or platform you're using, or like how does it integrate if you're running a WordPress-based website or a Shopify-based website, or Wix or Squarespace or whatever?
Yeah, so we have a direct integration with WordPress in the same way that you if you used Yoast, it's like that, right? You just plug it in, it
Yep.
checks your content as you're writing it or updating it. That works fine and dandy. We also have native integrations with writing ecosystems like Google Docs and Microsoft Word. Right, this is primarily designed to help you during your content outlining, drafting, phases, that kind of stuff. On the
Mm-hmm.
flip side, what we're doing is, we are doing deep integration work with Google Search Console. And within Google Search Console, I think that there is a treasure trove of data that Google gives you, from that treasure trove of the queries that your content is performing for, all these different things. I think we can start to build topical knowledge graphs of where you're strong and where you're weak. And we can help you then kind of understand where what content is that you need to be producing to fill the gaps, where you have low visibility in terms of searches that you're trying to capture, where you have high visibility. And I do think that there's a lot of stuff there. So that's where a lot of our current R&D is focused on, is how do we build, and there's a lot of it is still in technical terms, but an n-gram word vector analysis of how your website is performing in terms of query matches that you're looking to uncover. And what does that mean, right, in terms of your topical authority or your content coverage for a particular topic. And I think that if if the past was all about, kind of creating high quality, relevant content, building links, fixing your technical SEO issues, now that we've entered this world of infinite content, it's really about, how do you understand how to maximize, the most within the content that you've produced, and how do you understand, how a topic is evolving in terms of the searcher intents that a user is likely to care about, and how do you then deliver the most meaningful content to match each one of these like search journeys and search stages. Because the content production side of things is is commoditized, it's done, right? But now it's about content strategy, right? How do you deliver, the topics that somebody actually cares about, and how do you, write it in the way that is most likely to conclude the search journey?
Very cool. All right. I know we're out of time, but I wanted to also call out some of the amazing content that you write on LinkedIn and make sure our listener who's interested can go check that stuff out. So is that primarily where you write your thought-provoking and insightful articles, is on LinkedIn, or do you write somewhere else too?
Yeah, I think Twitter X has been kind of a weird show since the takeover, and so LinkedIn appears to be where the party is at. We also host every other week webinars where we bring in, you know, awesome speakers to share their knowledge about what's going on in SEO. So you can find that by subscribing to the Clearscope newsletter. And I'd say, yeah, LinkedIn and the Clearscope newsletter is where you can find a lot of my recent theories or mullings of what we see happening in search.
Yeah. So we'll include links to all that in the show notes for this episode. Awesome. And one last real quick question. I'm just curious. Uh, so are you like a fan of online gaming and that sort of thing? Because I looked in your bio and history and saw League of Legends, and you had several I don't know, startups or websites in that space. League of Legends, is that a passion of yours?
I would say electronic sports or esports is a passion. I think back in the day, I was a big StarCraft 2 gamer and nerd. And, even before that, it was like online poker. So I've always had this affinity towards wanting to play games at competitive levels and a deep appreciation for, those that do. So throughout my startup journey, I have always been dabbling in esports related things, whether it be, Twitch Metrics was a website that my business partner and I started where it scraped Twitch viewership data and graphed the performance of each game from a viewership perspective over time. You could also see the most popular streamers. We sold that to a friend of mine, like 3, 4 years ago. And he's taken it and, tried to, or is turning it into some sort of like business to business, selling data to, like McKinsey and these kinds of consulting firms that want to see data. And yeah, overall, I think there is a part of me that's like, it'd be awesome to like own an esports team at some point, like a Team Liquid, a Team Solo Mid. But I think the unit economics of doing that aren't great. Do have you dabbled in esports or
No,
league
not
yourself?
at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I own a couple of. I've got a domain portfolio, and I own a couple of esports domains, but I haven't done anything with them. But yeah, I don't have time for online gaming or anything like that. It's just I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean these days I don't either. I just say, I'm playing Clearscope and, I'm playing to win. And that's the biggest game that I've ever played.
Awesome. Well, you got a great thing going, and you're really adding value to the SEO community. I've been watching your posts on LinkedIn for a while, and I wanted to reach out and get you booked on the show. So I'm finally glad to check that off the off the list. Great to have had you on, and thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Well, thank you so much, Stephan.
All right, and thank you, listener. Hope you got some things you're going to now apply in your business and in your life from this episode. So get out there, make it a great week. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.